You are listening to the Nightline Sports Network, brought to you by Travis Dever and the Dever team, 386-690-1636.
Welcome to the AAC Report, only on the Nightline Sports Network. I'm Jeff Allen. Thanks so much for lending your eardrums to our humble little affair. Coming up, we will talk about the great tradition that is the Army-Navy game with Joe Miller of the Navy Radio Network. And with the news of the Tulsa-CIncinnati cancellation, we will talk about that with Kelly Hines of the Tulsa World. Kelly and Joe standing by in the virtual green room, presumably talking about Tulsa and Navy's game last week. They'll be on to join us in just a moment. They will be joining us separately, but they wait in the green room. And as I mentioned, Tulsa clinched a spot in the AAC championship game with a 19-6 win at Navy in a big defensive battle at the Navy Marine Corps Memorial Stadium. Tulsa became the first visiting team to win on Navy's senior day since 2002, as the Golden Hurricane limited the midshipmen to 153 yards of total offense. Tulsa broke a 6-6 tie on a 66-yard touchdown pass from Zach Smith to Josh Johnson in the third quarter. And the Golden Hurricane got 2 fourth-quarter field goals from Special Teams Player of the Week Zach Long to put the game away. Long had 4 field goals, while defensive tackle Jackson Player had 12 tackles, 2 sacks, and 4.5 tackles for loss to earn Defensive Player of the Week. Here's Golden Hurricanes head coach Philip Montgomery.
First of all, just really excited for our players. These guys have dedicated themselves. They have been through all kinds of different obstacles throughout the year, and to put themselves in the position they did tonight, obviously coming to Navy. Navy hasn't been beat on senior night in, 15, 17 years. I don't know what it is. So, it's a really, really tall task to get that done. I thought our guys played extremely hard. This is a hard-fought game. Navy is an outstanding team that is well coached, and Ken does a great job with them. I wish them well versus Army. But, for us, I thought our guys just continued to keep battling. Our defense played lights out, especially in the first half, but really the whole game. I thought our defensive line was really crucial in all of that. Offensively, we finally got some things going. We were just too inconsistent in the first half. We had the big play called back for a touchdown. We had other things that were open that we just missed or we dropped. And so I think finally in the second half, we finally got into a little rhythm after we hit JJ on the big touchdown reception. And we started really looking at the big picture of it. Find ways to run that clock, to run the football, keep our defense as much as we can onto the sideline, even though they were playing lights out, but just trying to eat that clock and get out of here with a big win. So excited for our players, for our coaches, for our university, and we get an opportunity now to go play in the championship and play for the championship. And that's what this goal was when we started. Get bowl eligible, have an opportunity to play for a championship, and we'd love to do it right there in the city of Tulsa. So hopefully we'll get that opportunity.
Tulane closed out the regular season with 4 wins in its last 5 games as the Green Wave clinched a third consecutive season at 500 or better with a 35-21 victory against Memphis. Tulane led by freshman quarterback Michael Pratt, who threw for 254 yards and 2 touchdowns and rushed for 2 more TDs, engineering a Green Wave offense that finished with 419 total yards, and that earned him Offensive Player of the Week honors. Pratt has 18 touchdown passes in his rookie campaign, the most by a Tulane signal caller since the 2012 season. Reflecting on the game of the year, head coach Willie Fritz.
Big win for us. This has been a tough season. The first thing I told them in the locker room was, who thought we were going to play 11 games this year? We were one of the few teams in the country that actually stayed on schedule. The only game that was changed had nothing to do with us. And I'm going to use it in recruiting, that we got really good young men, good people surrounding them in our program, and it allowed us to play 11 ball games this year. So I think that's indicative of the type of people we have in our program and the culture that we have here. There's been some ups and downs this year. Obviously, we wish our record was a lot better than what it was, but qualifying for a bowl game, first time in school history, we're excited about that. Getting an opportunity to play again, we're excited about that, and then this was a big win today. Memphis has got a very storied program, and it was good to get him in here and get this win.
All right, so we look ahead to this week. As we mentioned, the Tulsa-Cincinnati game, which was to determine home field for the AAC championship game, has been postponed due to COVID issues with Cincinnati. Houston at Memphis, a game rescheduled from September. That'll be a Saturday noon kickoff on ESPN+. Houston leads the all-time series 15-13, and Memphis won last season's game by a 45-27 score. And as we mentioned, this week is the annual Army-Navy game, and we'll be right back to talk about it with Joe Miller of the Navy Radio Network when the AAC Report continues in just a moment.
Hey, this is Travis Dever, Kai's Real Estate, the Dever team, New Smyrna Beach. Your source for real estate and everything else, New Smyrna Beach. Proud sponsor of Nightline. Call me anytime at 386-690-1636. That's 386-690-1636. Let me show you my hometown, New Smyrna Beach, UCF's favorite beach. Go Knights and charge on.
An auto accident can change your life forever. At Chad Barr Law, we are raising the bar on what to expect from your personal injury attorney. Hi, I'm Chad Barr, and I want you to know that our entire team is dedicated to providing you with the representation you deserve in your greatest time of need. If you or a loved one have been injured in an auto accident, call 407-599-9036 for a free consultation or visit chadbarlaw.com. At Chad Barr Law, our clients come to us in need and leave as family. Offices, Altamont Springs.
Looking for more out of your Porsche? Look no further than Flat6Motorsports.com. They have the widest selection of aftermarket Porsche parts anywhere in the world. With over 85 product lines and in-depth expertise, Flat6Motorsports.com is your one-stop shop for any Porsche performance needs. Whether you're shopping for intakes, exhausts, suspension, or tuning, they have you covered. Flat6Motorsports.com is the premier Porsche aftermarket specialist. Check them out at Flat6Motorsports.com.
And it is time once again for America's Game, the annual Army-Navy Clash. And joining us to talk about that once again is Joe Miller from the Navy Radio Network. Joe, thanks once again for being on the show.
No problem, Jeff. Love to be here all the time. It's looking forward to another great Army-Navy game.
Yeah, so 2020, of course, is the year of change and adapting. So instead of the game being played in Baltimore or Philadelphia or any other neutral location, the game is actually at West Point for the first time since, I believe, the 1940s.
Yeah, 1943. I mean, it's obviously going to be a little bit of a different atmosphere, but I guess everybody's, first and foremost excited that the game's going to go ahead and play and everything like that. But, it's a unique setting. I mean, I've been there a couple times doing other sports. Obviously, I've never been there for a football game, so that'll be different. And I know for a lot of the coaching staff and for a lot of the players, they've obviously never been there as well. So it's a different atmosphere, no doubt. They'll have the cadets and the midshipmen there, but not many more people there for the game. So it will be, you'll be able to get, 10,000 people in there, I'm guessing. So they'll have a little bit more of an atmosphere than what we've been used to this season for the most part. We've had a couple games with fans, but for the most part, fans haven't been allowed to come to Navy games this season. So it's a unique twist to what we're used to and what we experience. And, it's tough. Somebody was asking, we were talking about this the other day, whether or not there's a home field advantage for once. And, I don't know. I mean, the crowd will be split even for the most part. It is in a neutral setting for the most part, for, better part of a decade, the games I've been going to, there really doesn't ever seem to be a distinct, crowd advantage either way. So maybe there'll be a little bit more of a push towards Army as far as the home field advantage. But I think everybody's looked at it as a unique experience and just glad to be playing it first and foremost, and an opportunity, obviously, to put a positive spin to the end of the regular season for this Navy team.
I got to imagine, though, that having one of the end zones painted with Navy on it can't be going over very well at West Point.
Yeah. It was funny. We saw that last week, and I didn't even think about that for the lead up to the game, whether or not they would obviously for sponsorship reasons that they've tried to paint it as a neutral field, but it certainly is different. It certainly is unique, and I'm looking forward to it. I think it's a great opportunity to sort of make some history too. I mean, what better way to sort of put a stamp on the Army-Navy rivalry by actually going to their field and winning as well.
Yeah, that definitely would be a big feather in the cap that they would be able to hold on to for a long, long time. So as we get prepared for this game, it is interesting to me that that COVID has been so impactful on the college football season. Navy certainly has run into that as well. Not only at the beginning of the season, not doing much in the way of practice before getting that unfortunate steamroll by BYU, and then having to pause activities for a little while. Can you talk about how the fits and starts have been in trying to deal with this season?
Yeah, I mean, it's been pretty crazy. I mean, a lot of people, I should say, I was going to say a lot of people knew sort of how Navy handled it, at least from our perspective, but I don't know if a lot of people from the national perspective knew how Navy handled the practice leading up to the BYU game. We all sat there and kind of wondered aloud what it was going to look like after finally, getting involved in contact on the first game of the season. I mean, it's something that I don't know if it's ever been done before, and I don't know if it'll be done again. Obviously, the result in the first game didn't go the way that Navy wanted it to, but that was the decision that they had coming into it, that they wanted to try to be as careful as possible at the beginning of the start of the season to get the season underway. And I understood the thinking then, and obviously some people started to question it afterwards, but I think all of us knew going in what the situation was going to be that first game of the season. They were going to kind of step easy into the season with the practice and in the bubble at the time. They were trying to keep a bubble around the Naval Academy. And then about mid-season, they allowed that bubble to burst to some extent, allowing the midshipmen to go off campus. And obviously then, as everybody saw, then, it was a combination, as I think everybody's season has been, a combination of contact tracing and positive tests and everything that goes into that, and we saw for a couple weeks Navy being shut down, and then they got restarted. We had to move a couple of games around. We haven't traveled at all this year for the radio crew for Navy this season, so that's been a different way to handle the broadcast for sure. But a couple of weeks ago, talking to the coaches right before we got back underway, after we played on Halloween and then we went a month without playing again. It was one of those things where, talking to them, it was like, people assume that because of this, we've been able to, work in some new players, figure out, our depth and stuff like that. But because of the contact tracing, they really weren't able to do anything for 2 weeks. So it definitely helped heal some injuries, but it wasn't like there was extra practice time to sort of develop other players or figure out what else they could do, either offensively or defensively. So it was really just downtime because they just didn't have that ability to practice. So I think the misconception, I think sometimes, is that if a team pauses activities, that allows teams to sort of be able to work through and practice and figure out, who's going to be my quarterback now and who's going to be my third running back, who are the guys that are going to step up and play. But, that just didn't happen because they had to stop. So it's funny because you get an opportunity over these Zoom calls to talk to coaches, and it's different from our perspective. Usually we get to meet with them and talk to them face to face. That hasn't happened this year. But I think they've tried as best as they could to sort of understand the environment they're in and try to best case scenario out of each and every opportunity, and it hasn't been easy for them. I mean, I remember early in the season, Coach Niamontololo talking about this is like Pop Warner. He he just rolls up to practice at 3:00. He practices. He coaches the team for a couple hours and goes back home, and then doesn't come back to the office until 3:00. So they all their meetings and everything that was taking place, that was taking place over Zoom calls. They were having coaching meetings, and it was a weird situation. Obviously, a lot of teams are going through it. There's no doubt about that. And it has been a unique experience all year long.
Well, I tell you, the one other question I wanted to ask you in relation, to this game is that typically the second Saturday in December belongs exclusively to Army and Navy, but not so this year because of all the scheduling changes and things like that. That said, they've done such a great job in recent years of, making this such a marquee game, and that it still will be appointment viewing on CBS, and it still will get a lot of eyeballs. You guys will still get a lot of listeners. But it is interesting that the fact that they will have other games going on around them, and of course, Army is actually going to play Air Force after this game.
Yeah, that's another part of it. It's like usually we go into this and we understand what the Commander-in-Chief's trophy is and where it's going and where it's not going at the conclusion of this game. And as most people know, I mean, it's the number one prized possession of the three military schools as far as the football teams are concerned. So that's certainly different. When you look at what Army's done this season, I'm watching a couple of games this week, today, getting ready for the game, and they haven't played. You look at their schedule; it's been a lot of FBS schools. A lot of FCS schools, and not a ton of different types of teams that they've played. So it's kind of hard to get a good grasp of how good they are. To be quite honest with you, I mean they've had more success than failures so far this season, but the one sort of comparable team we thought we were going to see is they had a game scheduled with BYU, and that game got canceled. So we haven't seen them play them. We haven't seen them play Air Force at this point. We saw them play Cincinnati, and we all know how good Cincinnati is. And, they struggle to move the football. And first team has had as much success as Army has had. They've started 4 different quarterbacks this season. It's kind of a weird when I was going over the numbers today. I mean, they've played a lot of different guys, and I don't know if that's necessarily because of the schedule they've played or, it's one of those issues where they're just trying to figure out who their best 11 is on the offensive defensive side of the football field. But I think from every aspect, you go into a game preparing it, and they've had 3 weeks where they haven't played now, and Navy had to play an incredibly physical team in Tulsa last week. I mean, as rough and tumble a game as I've seen in this conference last week, and Navy now has to lick their wounds and get healthy and turn around. Usually there is, at least except for the 1 year we played in the AAC title game, there's usually been a 2-week gap between these games as well. And Navy doesn't have that this time around. It was a good and bad because they hadn't played for a while, so they needed some games to get in some reps. And going into that Memphis game, they lost that game, in a close game, but technically they still sort of held their own, identity as far as trying to get to the AAC championship game. So they still had that to play for. Obviously, since those 2 losses against Memphis and Tulsa, that's gone out the door. But it's completely different. Practice time, lead up to this game, where it's at, how it's, and the fact that Air Force is playing Army afterwards. The CIC technically is not completely up for grabs in the game. Jeff, you name it. It's different here in 2020.
And one of the cool things they always do for this game is each school does special uniforms for the game. I think that is such a great thing, and they always come up, and I would even say both sides come up with some really classic and wonderful looks.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, I really like this year's outfit. I'm very partial to white on white, and I think it looks good. They've done it a couple times, and they use these sort of the marble from the rotunda at the Naval Academy, which one of the main sites there, and sort of use that as the template for the shoulders and the helmet. And then, this has become part of this rivalry, as you mentioned. I think that the fan base starts to get, pumped up about the uniforms, a couple weeks out before they're released. When they're released, it's become a really big deal. It started, ironically enough, a couple of years ago, I guess probably 5-6 years ago. We opened the season with Ohio State, and they wanted to do something special for that. And they, had unique uniforms for that. And it's sort of grown a couple years ago when we played Notre Dame, because at the time, Notre Dame, its first year becoming of an Under Armour school, they wanted to do something special for that game. So, they've gone out with probably like 7 or 8 unique uniforms. So hopefully they got many lined up for the future, because this is, as you mentioned, it's become an important part of this rivalry. And I'm looking forward to seeing the uniforms on the field. Last year it was more of a throwback to the 63 team. I loved a couple years ago when we played in the snow. Unfortunately, Army was all in white that day, but we had one of my favorites, our Blue Angel blue uniforms that I thought really were fantastic. So yeah, it's part of this game now, and I think each fan base kind of goes back and forth about what looks better and what doesn't, and it's added a little extra.
Well, I definitely say, pardon the pun, it is an important fabric of the rivalry, if you will.
Yeah.
So as far as Navy goes, last year was a tremendous season with Malcolm Perry going off to historic chart numbers. So as they come into this game with Army this year, they're 3-6. Besides COVID, what has been the biggest challenge for the midshipmen?
It's ironically enough, Jeff. I would have never thought saying this at the beginning of the season. It's running the football. I mean, it just hasn't been up to the expectations that they have sought over the last 2 decades. I mean, the quarterback position has not been a key component in the running game, and we knew that they weren't going to be able to match 2,000 yards rushing for Malcolm Perry. I don't think anybody expected them to come close to that, but they're barely over 200 yards rushing from the quarterback position going into this game, which is, to me, I've never seen anything like it for their offense. I mean, they have started 3 different guys at quarterback this season. They started with Dalen Morris, and everybody was excited because they thought he was going to bring an added passing element, and he did. Dalen's a very good throwing quarterback, but I think they got away from what they were traditionally tied to, and he couldn't do some of the stuff in the running game that they've traditionally done, and I think they've tried to figure out, why can't we run the football more effectively from the quarterback position, and the production just hasn't been there, running the football from the quarterback position, and that sort of affects their ability to get the ball outside to their slot backs, and Nelson Smith, their fullback, has been amazing this year. He's having a great year, but he can't do it on his own, and so they've just struggled to run the ball, and a lot of it is due to the quarterback position and just not finding that guy. And I think Xavier Arline, who started against Tulane and then started last week against Tulsa, freshman, I think they really like his ability, explosiveness. I mean, I hate to say this, and we were talking about this last week during the Tulsa game. I hate to say this, but he does look like Malcolm Perry out there at times, and you don't want to put that pressure on him. Because he's still got a long way to go. But I think they're really excited. He was into the academy as one of the top lacrosse recruits in the country. I mean, it was a real coup for them to get him to play, to initially come there to play lacrosse. And, the opportunity was there. He initially had signed with North Carolina. And, the Naval Academy gave an opportunity for him to play football and lacrosse. So to get him to come here was a big coup. I mean, we don't really talk about recruits, that illustrious recruiting. I mean, recruiting at the Naval Academy, if we get a 3-star guy, I think people go crazy. And when you get a top guy, it's a little bit different. So I think they like his athleticism. He showed some flashes last week. He's still learning. There's no doubt about that. I mean, this offense, it takes some time to learn. And most of the weird thing is most of these guys coming out of high school wearing the shotgun, and they're trying to adjust to being under the center and running the triple option where they were running spread option in high school, and it's taken a little bit longer than I think maybe the adjustment level was maybe 5-6 years ago for some of these guys. But they're excited about our line. I don't know if they've officially announced whether he'll start on Saturday, but he started last week. I thought he did a pretty good job, but I would imagine he would be the guy on Saturday against the Black Knights. And, you know, it's amazing. These two teams over the last 4 or 5 years have started, and for Navy's purposes, it's been mainly injuries. They've had a lot of guys banged up and at the quarterback position late in these seasons, and it's affected the starter for the Army-Navy game. But it looks like, you know, you could have an Army's quarterback made his first career start last game for them. He could be making his second career start, and our line could be making his third career start, and both are freshmen in the Army-Navy game. Certainly a unique experience for those guys, and we've seen a lot of guys, at least on the younger side. Zach Abey, who was Navy's quarterback for a couple of years, he made his first career start in the Army-Navy game as a sophomore. So it's happened here recently the last couple of years for both squads. Christian Anderson last year for Army made his first career start in the Army-Navy game, and neither of those guys won. So it's a tough task to sort of make one of your first or second career starts in the Army-Navy game. But both quarterbacks are young, and both teams have used. The Army started 4 different guys at quarterback. Navy started 3 different guys. So it can, just by attrition, that position can take some hits because of the fact that they're running the ball 20 times a game. But this year, they've been pretty healthy. It's just the lack of production.
Well, Navy comes in 3-6, Army at 7-2. The midshipmen broke a 3-game losing streak in last year's game. How do you think it plays out?
I think I would be surprised if either team was able to score more than 20 points. Mm-hmm. I think it's a low-scoring game. I was going over the numbers today. Low-scoring games here in recent history, and we've had some. Both these defenses have really good middle linebackers. Both these defenses, I think, can really do a good job stopping each other's offenses. And I can't imagine a high-scoring game in this game. So I'm obviously going to say Navy's going to win this game. But, I think it's probably something like 17-13, 14-10, something like that. I really think if you can, it's during the 14-year run that Navy had, there were some games where Navy was able to blow out Army. There's no doubt about that. But there was a decent amount of close games, and it seemed like it was always a turnover late that kind of decided things, and it was always Army turning the ball over. And I think turnovers will be a big part of it because you have 2 young guys at quarterback. But I would imagine both teams try to be as basic as they can early on because of both those guys and their inexperience. But Jeff, I think it's going to be a low-scoring game. I think it's going to be a one-possession game late. And obviously I'm going to take the mids, no doubt about that. But I would be shocked if either team scored over 21 points in the game. It would really be something where, turnovers dictated something like that. Unless somebody turns the ball over 2 or 3 times and there's a fumble return for a touchdown or a pick 6 or something like that, I have a hard time seeing a lot of points in the game.
And as you mentioned, you've been calling the road games from home. Will that still be the case this week as well?
No, we're actually going up there.
Okay.
So we will be making the trip up there. We're getting out of the. We've been at the stadium all year long for home and road games, so we're gonna head up there. So looking forward to it. There's obviously a little bit more restrictions and stuff like that, so we have to get some more testing done and all that before we're good to go. But we'll get that done on Thursday, and then we'll be up there for Friday and Saturday.
All right, and of course, I have to ask you to do it because it's tradition. I gotta have you give me a Go Navy, beat Army.
Go Navy, beat Army.
All right, that's Joe Miller, the Navy Radio Network. Joe, thanks once again for being on.
No problem, Jeff. Thank you.
America's game with Navy visiting Army, 3:00 Saturday on CBS. Navy leads the all-time series 61-52. There have been 7 ties in this long-running traditional series. Navy broke a 3-game losing streak, as we said, last year with a 31-7 victory. The other game that was supposed to take place this week, Cincinnati at Tulsa, that was to determine home field for the AAC Championship game next week. That now has been canceled due to the COVID issues going on at Cincinnati. And due to the Bearcats having a better CFP ranking per the conference tiebreaker rules, they will host the title game. And up next, we'll talk about what this week's cancellation and what it means for next week. We'll do that with Kelly Hines of the Tulsa World when we come right back on the AAC Report.
Hello, Night Nation. This is Andrew Fagley reminding you to tune in every Tuesday night, 9 to 10 p.m. on WDBO 107.3 FM and AM 580, plus the WDBO app for Nightline at Night. Brought to you by Chad Bar Law. We'll be taking your calls and your texts reacting to the previous week's UCF sports action, and you never know who will show up. Once again, that's Nightline at Night, every Tuesday, 9 to 10 p.m. on WDBO 107.3 FM and AM 580, plus the WDBO app. Go Knights and charge on.
Welcome. This is a promo for the Take a Left at Albuquerque podcast, new to the Nightline Sports Network. You should listen to it. I say things like this. We need to stop blaming Jerry because we would do the exact same thing if we owned the Dallas freaking Cowboys. Do you know how much fun it is to own the Dallas Cowboys? My guests will say things sometimes like this.
It's the Lord of the Flies thing that happens when they don't understand that things are wrong, spoiler alert, until Piggy dies.
Lord of the Flies has been out for like 100 years. I don't even know.
Sorry to everyone at home who I spoiled the book for. A book's been out for like 90 years or something.
And sometimes, rarely though, I'll say really stupid things like this. If they don't make it out of the West and the Raptors get to the finals, I will go on either this show or whoever's show and say that Kawhi Leonard is overrated because I have too much evidence of it. New episodes drop every Friday with me and some of my good friends right here on the Nightline Sports Network.
All right, time now to talk about the news in the American this week. The cancellation of the Tulsa-Cincinnati game that was to decide home field advantage for the conference championship in another week. But that cancellation has forced things to change a bit. And to talk about that, we have Kelly Hines once again from the Tulsa World. Kelly, thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me again.
Yeah, I tell you what, with Tulsa being such a big story throughout the course of this season and with them competing for a championship, you've been on often enough to almost be a co-host of the show.
It has been a crazy season, so I think that's justified.
Yes, and crazy got even crazier this week now that Cincinnati's COVID issues continue. So the game this week that was going to be at Tulsa to determine the home field for the championship game is now off. Cincinnati will get home field by virtue of the tiebreaker that has them with the higher ranking in the college football player rankings, in which Cincinnati dropped a spot to 8. Tulsa moves up 1 to 24. So give it to me. What is it? What is the fan base feeling? I would almost think that there's a little thing that they might be thinking, something's amiss here.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, and Tulsa fans, they're kind of used to, I wouldn't say being jilted, but maybe not being, one of those powerhouse programs in the conference and maybe being an afterthought at times. And so, when things haven't always gone in your favor and something like this happens, your first instinct is to be a little, skeptical of what's going on. But when you think about it from Cincinnati's perspective, I mean, they have bigger goals. I think that they were really hoping to crush the college football playoff and taking away a quality opponent, even though you're going to play them the next week. I don't know that really benefits them. So, I don't think that there's anything, sketchy going on, but it definitely, from Tulsa's perspective, it hurts in a lot of ways. So I kind of try to see both sides of it, and I do believe that Cincinnati has, some cases going on. They've had that, that's been ongoing for several weeks now. So that's not anything crazy to find out that they have, some positives and the contact tracing and all of that. So, I think that there are just some mixed emotions all the way around.
Yeah, and of course, this was going to be rescheduled from back in October, which, I'm sure they would have preferred to have played the game back then anyway. It was an odd situation where they were going to have to play back-to-back weeks, much like, Memphis and Cincinnati did last season.
Yeah.
It was, bringing up some interesting things. Obviously Tulsa would want to win home field advantage in that game, but, playing back-to-back weeks, I think that causes more problems than good solutions, I think.
Yeah, I think the only, unfortunate thing is, if the conference championship game, if that were a neutral site game, if that were a game that was in Memphis, or, if that was just something that was, already determined, then this week's game didn't have, that on the line. And so it wouldn't, be as difficult to take that away. So for Tulsa to not even have a say in, whether, they wanted to win that game Saturday and then to be able to host that game next week. That was, their goal. So to not even be able to do that because of the other team's COVID situation that has affected this game, now twice, that's a frustrating situation. But, you're not really seeing people, associated with the university being, vocally upset about that because, they've dealt with a lot of stuff this season. They're kind of used to these games, being affected. But, when you also consider that this was going to be senior day and they could have done, senior day at a previous home game if they had known that this game wasn't going to happen. But, that's something that, means a lot. That's something that for seniors, that's a big deal. So for that to not be an option, there are just a lot of things that play into it. But yeah, I mean, the game itself, if it didn't have the, who hosts, if that wasn't on the line, then it doesn't especially make sense to play those games back to back.
Would there be a possible scenario that Tulsa could pull a Coastal Carolina and throw a quick opponent on the schedule this week?
I don't think that they were, seriously looking at that because, they want to go out and win a conference championship next week. And to do that, you're playing a team that hasn't played, in 3 weeks now. So Tulsa coming off that game at Navy, that was a really physical game. They had quite a few guys banged up in that game. In terms of that, I think it's probably good to not have a game this week, get some guys healthy, because, their goal is to win a conference championship. They know that, everything else is, that's going to be difficult to be in a New Year's Six game, and all of those things are going to be difficult to achieve. Their priority is going to be winning a conference championship, which is going to be tough. I mean, that'd be tough in Tulsa. It's going to be tough in Cincinnati. But, they just want to have that chance. So, they probably could have figured out something for this week, but it wasn't worth the risk involved.
I know Zaven Collins got dinged up in that game against Navy. What was his status looking like for this week's game?
Yeah, they were optimistic about him being able to play this week. He kind of, those turf toe injuries are just so unpredictable. And, he kind of just re-aggravated it and tried to go out in the second half and, played one play and then came out and didn't play the rest of the half. I think it's just difficult to overcome those things. And it's one of those injuries that you think you might be ready to go, and then you go out there and it's like, maybe not. So, they thought that they would be able to get him ready for this week, but now to have an additional week, that's a pretty good situation for him. It does hurt in some regards because, for him to get more traction for national awards, I think, he probably needed to have another really good performance. And, Cincinnati's a really good team, and it would have been interesting to see him match up against them twice, but at least they have that one more game out there for him to see what he could do in that one.
And, of course, in the Navy game, yet another slow start for Tulsa. And, the slow starts have kind of led to the dramatic finishes more often than not for them. It didn't have to be dramatic against Navy, at least this time around, to the extremes it has been throughout the course of the season. And I guess that's one of the big riddles of the year that I'm sure if they could solve it, they would solve it quickly, is the slow starts.
Yeah, I mean, I think like the offense just, not being able to get into a rhythm, like that's just, it's been painful to watch at times. And even though that game wound up being, a double-digit victory for Tulsa, the offense, for the most part, aside from the one touchdown play of the whole game, the offense was a struggle. Still not getting into a rhythm, not being able to consistently move the ball down the field. I think that's just been a recurring theme for this team, and to be able to still, be 6-1 and, have the success that they've had. I think that obviously that speaks a lot to what the defense has done, but, for special teams to come in and play a role, Zach Long, 4 for 4 on field goals. They won in a different way. They've been winning these, crazy games in the fourth quarter, and they kind of just gutted this one out and made some field goals, and their defense played well. And it wasn't especially pretty, and it wasn't dramatic, but that was a really big win for Tulsa. They hadn't been able to beat Navy in conference play since they joined the league, and Navy had won 17 games in a row on senior day, and being able to pick up that one was such a big hurdle, I felt like, for Tulsa, even though it wasn't, a drama-filled game like what they've had the previous, month or so, but it still was a huge win for them.
Well, Tulsa, although they won't get to host the championship game, they are in it. That's definitely the good news. And then they've got extra time to prepare for a very good Navy, rather a very good Cincinnati football team. So let me ask you this: are there any like backup plans should COVID continue to be a problem in Cincinnati of naming a champion if they're not able to play next week?
I saw some of the, policy stuff about that today, and it sounded like, there would be a replacement team, instead of going that route. Mm-hmm. So, like, instead of the first and second, place teams, or the two that are seated that way via the tiebreakers, it would be the second and third. But, everything is subject to review, and I don't know exactly how that would go because you can't really push that game any further back. And I think the conference wants that game to be played. I think it'd be crazy to just not play it. I don't know. That's just, I think everybody is just expecting Cincinnati's, numbers to go down and for this game to be played. That would be the easy solution. Yeah,
or they're going to be short a lot of players.
Yeah.
That's certainly out there. And of course, I mentioned Coastal Carolina a little bit earlier. I imagine they're going to be very big Tulsa fans come next week.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. And I saw there was a Coastal Carolina offensive lineman who retweeted, one of my tweets today about, Cincinnati Tulsa cancellation. I was like, it's so crazy that the players are interested in what's going on with that game. I mean, that's 2020 has just been a trip, but I think that's I really enjoy Coastal Carolina and what they've been able to do. So I can't wait to see how all of this plays out.
Yeah, and wouldn't it be such a 2020 thing too for all this to happen, have all this dramatic situation take place that they don't get to play this week, and Tulsa goes in and beats Cincinnati on the road? Wouldn't that be such a 2020 thing?
I mean, I think that would be, at this point, nothing is going to be a surprise when it comes to Tulsa. I think that would be just like a fitting into, their season. But I just know that's going to be so difficult. And, asking Tulsa to be super effective on offense when that's been an issue against everyone and to do it against Cincinnati's defense. But yeah, you're right. I mean, that would just be the fitting end to this whole thing.
No question about it. And of course, I guess you're going to be waiting for something to happen, because I guess Tulsa basketball is now on a little bit of a hiatus too.
Yeah, so they're hoping to resume practice on Saturday. This week's games were affected. Right now they'd be hosting Arkansas, and that was a game that, Tulsa is very much looking forward to. So that game got postponed, possibly canceled. And then the crosstown rivalry against Oral Roberts, that was supposed to be Saturday, also that got affected. So, it sounded like just one positive test result, and, that put everything on pause, but they're hoping things will, be able to go back to normal, and they'll be able to start practice on Saturday, because, conference play starts next week. So you'd hate to see, that pause continued into next week, but I think everybody's going to be dealing with these pauses. I think it's going to happen to everyone.
Yeah, and what are your early season impressions of the basketball team so far?
So many new faces. I think it's just a challenge trying to get everybody on the same page. I think especially when you have young guys, with Tulsa's defense, that's something that takes some time to learn. So they've been playing a lot of man early on, and then that's been fine. It's just, the scoring hasn't quite been there. Some young guys, I think, trying to force some things, but, they beat Texas Arlington last week for the first win, and you start to see some things come together. I think it's going to be a work in progress for a while. In case teams tend to start pretty slow and then kind of pick up some momentum once they get to conference play. So maybe with conference play starting earlier, they'll be able to get going a little bit earlier, because you can't really take a long time this season to get things going. So just with there being some different personnel, it's just, I think it's just going to take a little bit more time.
All right. Well, I will let you get back to that Twitter feed of yours, because I imagine it's been pretty loaded today, given all the news and whatnot. And, and definitely, I got a feeling we're going to be talking again soon. Just
yeah, you're probably right.
Yeah. So my co-host, Kelly Hines, thanks again for being on the show. I appreciate it.
Anytime.
So the 2020 American Athletic Conference Championship game, it will be Saturday, December 19th, 8 p.m. Eastern, and that will be televised nationally on ABC. A couple other notes from the gridiron. UCF has been selected to play in the 2020 RoofClaim.com Boca Raton Bowl. I keep wanting to say Del Boca Vista. And that's going to be played Tuesday, December 22nd at FAU Stadium in Boca Raton. The game will be televised on ESPN and available nationally on ESPN Radio. The Knights' opponent of the game, likely to be an Atlantic Coast Conference team. That will be announced at a later date. The Knights also big in the news last week as, of course, quarterback Mackenzie Milton announced he would enter the transfer portal to play his final season. And SMU has been selected to play in the 2020 Tropical Smoothie Cafe Frisco Bowl. That'll be Saturday, December 19th at Toyota Stadium in Frisco, Texas. That game will be televised on ESPN2 at a time to be determined, as well as the date of the game. The opponent for the Mustangs will also be determined at a later date. From the hardwood, the player of the week in men's hoops, Kendrick Davis, the guard from SMU, averaged a double-double in 3 wins last week with 17.3 points, 9 assists, 4 rebounds, and 3.3 steals per contest. He scored 21 points in the Mustangs' win at Dayton on Sunday against Houston Baptist, matched his career high and the American single-game record with 13 assists, also adding 20 points and 6 steals with no turnovers. Freshman of the week is Trayvon Mark. For the second week in a row, he made his first collegiate start at South Carolina on Saturday, December 5th. 18 points, 4 rebounds, and 2 steals without committing. A turnover was 9 of 12 from the charity stripe. The women's player of the week, Elisa Pinzan from USF. She quarterbacked the Bulls to a 1-1 week against a pair of top 10 national opponents. The Bulls narrowly fell to number 4 Baylor 67-62 on December 1st before defeating number 6 Mississippi State 67-63 in overtime on December 5th. The win over Mississippi State was the first for USF against a top 10 opponent in program history. Pinzon averaged 7.5 rebounds, 7.5 assists, and 2 steals over the 2 games. She tallied 6 assists and 4 rebounds against Baylor before turning in a 14-point and a career-high 11-rebound effort, that along with 9 assists and 3 steals in the victory over Mississippi State. And the freshman of the week, Jerkayla Jordan of Tulane, repeating that honor for the second week in a row, averaged 19 points and 5.5 rebounds in a week that saw Tulane go 1-1, scored a career-high 20 at South Alabama on December 1st, chipping in 5 rebounds and 3 assists, a couple of blocks and a pair of steals as well. 18.6 boards, 3 assists, and a narrow loss at Georgia Tech on December 3rd. And Jordan was the American leader with a .923 free throw percentage, ranked 3rd in the league, 18.3 points per game as of December the 7th. And the points per game total is 6th among all NCAA Division I freshmen. And that's going to wrap things up for this week's show. As always, please follow me on Twitter at JeffAllen_88, and our Nightline Sports Network handle is at UCF_Nightline. This has been the AAC Report, only on the Nightline Sports Network. I'm Jeff Allen. Thanks for listening.